gentlemen, the clock has started. Yes, sir. Reading you loud and clear.
Roger all, Discovery.
Discovery, roger, very well.
Well, thank you, Andrew, and welcome to the May 1st, 2019 edition of Space News. And we've got the full team here tonight. It's Peter Aylward you're listening to, and we've got Tina Stagg, Michael Abdullah and Angelo De Grazia with me. We're all from the Space Association. And we're going to start off with some more Australian news. In fact, we're going to start off with some Melbourne news. RMIT University's rocket team wins a national competition. RMIT's student-led rocket team Hive has been notching up some big achievements of late. Now they're officially among Australia's best. The Hive team members designed and built a rocket to fly just over 9 kilometres high and win this year's Australian University's rocket competition at Thunder Down Under 2019. They even successfully conducted a groundbreaking scientific experiment while in flight. The Hive engineering team leader and PhD student James Kirby said the emotional win was just another step in the team's incredible journey to prove our unique capability at RMIT to launch scientific payloads to 30,000 feet using a fully reusable system is a huge step for the RMIT Hive rocket team, but it's also just the beginning, he said. We aim to double its target altitude with each consecutive year while developing systems capable of launching past the Kármán line at 100 kilometres, the boundary of space. Hive has been a huge success since it first launched onto the Australian rocketry scene in April 2018, previously winning stages 1 and 2 of the competition before last week's win at the main event. Since June 2018, the team has launched 6 rockets, with each one becoming larger and more complex. The rockets in the competition, held in the skies over Queensland, were required to achieve an altitude as close as possible to the target altitude, with penalties imposed for over or undershooting the altitude goal. Hive won the 30,000 feet category, or just over 9 kilometres. The competition also required teams to design and build a novel and innovative scientific experiment to be carried to the specific altitude. Hive successfully delivered an exciting microgravity experiment that tracked the behaviour of magnetic fluids in microgravity. Kirby said Hive provided a valuable space for students to work together to solve complex challenges within an innovative and collaborative environment. Well done, guys. And over to you, Tina.
Thanks, Peter, and good evening, space fans. In NASA news, turning to the commercial resupply program, NASA and SpaceX have agreed to launch a Dragon cargo resupply mission to the International Space Station, despite the recent Crew Dragon test accident. At a briefing last week about the science that the CRS-17 mission will send to the space station, NASA confirmed that the launch remained on schedule for April 30, but later in the week slipped it to May 1. The significance of the decision to proceed with the Cargo Dragon mission suggests the Crew Dragon anomaly is limited to systems like the Super Draco thrusters that the cargo version of the spacecraft lacks. In NASA's Commercial Crew program, the agency says it still has full confidence in SpaceX after the Crew Dragon test anomaly. In a brief statement last week, NASA said it and SpaceX had just started the process of investigating the mishap during testing of the Crew Dragon spacecraft's Super Draco launch abort thrusters on April 20. The agency provided no additional details about what happened and said it didn't know what effect it would have on the previous schedule of tests of the vehicle. SpaceX also has not released any additional information about the incident since shortly after it took place. A NASA safety panel said it will take time to understand what happened during the Crew Dragon test. At a regularly scheduled meeting last week, the Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel offered few new details about the anomaly. Members cautioned that it will take time to determine the root cause and urged patience as the investigation continues. The panel also noted that, even without the test anomaly, SpaceX still had a large body of work to complete before the vehicle would be ready for a crewed test flight. Boeing, which is gearing up for an uncrewed test flight of its CST-100 Starliner in early August, also has considerable work to complete before it's ready to fly people, the panel noted. Boeing tested rescue procedures for its Starliner commercial crew vehicle last week. The test at Port Canaveral covered what teams would do if the capsule, designed to return to Earth on land, splashed down in the water instead. Over to Angelo.
Thanks, Tina. And staying with NASA, let's talk SLS Orion. The safety panel, which Tina referred to before, ASAT, also called on NASA to retain a key test of the Space Launch System. NASA had discussed skipping the so-called green run test of the SLS core stage, an 8-minute static test flight of the stage's 4 engines, a move agency leadership said could cut 6 months from the SLS development schedule. However, the Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel said that the test was one of several key milestones the vehicle needed to complete in order to demonstrate it could safely carry people, and that there were no alternative ways to test the core stage. In a separate discussion, the panel recommended NASA immediately begin development of next-generation spacesuits, saying the ones currently used for space station spacewalks are aging and pose a safety risk. In further SLS Orion news, NASA has delayed a test of Orion's launch escape system by several weeks. The agency said last week that the Ascent Abort Test 2, which had been scheduled for early June, is now set for July 2nd. The agency said the delay allowed additional time to complete work on the abort system and also took into account availability of the range at Cape Canaveral. In the test, the booster will launch a boilerplate Orion capsule to an altitude of nearly 10,000 metres, at which point the abort system will pull the capsule away to splash down in the ocean. To NASA, Moon. NASA has updated its planned call for proposals for lunar landers under the second Next Space Technologies for Exploration Partnership, or Next Step 2 program. The program's aim is to enable a human mission to the Moon by broadening the scope to include integrated lander concepts. The original notice issued on April 8 this year described a plan to solicit proposals for activities related only to the ascent element of the human landing system. The update signals the intention by the end of May to seek proposals from industry in support of the rapid development of an integrated human lunar landing system, including elements such as a descent element, an ascent element, and a transfer vehicle. NASA will now seek proposals from US industry for the development, integration, and crewed demonstration of these elements as a functional human landing system that can fulfill NASA's requirements and meet the challenge to send the next man and the first woman to the Moon by 2024. Great news. Okay, over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Angelo. Let's move to Russia. The launch pad where Yuri Gagarin made his historic spaceflight may soon be decommissioned. Site number 1 at the Baikonur Cosmodrome, also known as Gagarin Start, is currently scheduled to host only 2 more Soyuz spacecraft launches later this year. Those missions will shift to the Soyuz 2 rocket, but there is no funding to update that pad to support the new version of the rocket. Another pad at Baikonur will instead be used for Soyuz 2 launches, including crewed missions. Let's look at China. Chinese startups are making progress in the development of new launch vehicles. Link Space succeeded with a vertical takeoff and landing test late last month of its RLV-T5 rocket, flying to an altitude of 20 metres before making a powered landing. The company's goal is a full test flight of the New Line 1 orbital launcher, capable of carrying 200 kilograms to a 500-kilometre Sun synchronous orbit in 2021. Another company, Land Space, tested the power pack for its Tianq-12 engine last month, with a full system test of the engine scheduled for May. That engine will be used in its medium-lift Zhurk 2 rocket. And a third company, iSpace, tested elements of an engine called JD-1 that will be used on its Hyperbola 2 rocket starting in 2020. The rush of Chinese launch startups has led the Chinese government to develop new launch regulations. An official with the China National Space Administration said last week that it will soon issue rules regarding launch vehicle manufacturing and launch activities for safety and to protect key technologies. And on to Japan. Japan's Hayabusa 2 spacecraft succeeded in making a crater on the surface of the asteroid Ryugu. Images returned by the spacecraft last week showed that an impactor it released earlier this month created a crater about 10 metres in diameter. The spacecraft will attempt to touch down in the crater to collect samples as soon as late May. And let's look at the United Arab Emirates. The UAE's first Mars mission is nearly complete and on schedule for a launch next northern summer. The UAE Space Agency and Mohammed bin Rashid Space Centre said last week that the HOPE spacecraft is now 85% complete and should be ready for a series of environmental tests starting in June. HOPE is scheduled to launch in July 2020 on a Japanese H-2A rocket to go into orbit around Mars to study the planet's atmosphere. Okay, back to you, Tina.
Thank you, Michael. In Blue Origin news, Jeff Bezos and his secretive rocket company have an odd way of building anticipation. It looks like Blue Origin is up to something next month after the company posted a cryptic tweet last week with nothing more than the date May 9, 2019 and an image of Ernest Shackleton's ship, Endurance. Now, it so happens that Bezos is due to provide an update on Blue Origin on May 9 in Washington, D.C., where the Satellite 2019 conference is being held that week. Endurance was the ship that launched in 1914, embarking on an epic trans-Antarctic expedition. But what that has to do with Blue Origin's work to compete with other commercial space companies is unclear. Bezos has spoken in the past about wanting Blue Origin to land and get a base going on the moon, and there is a Shackleton crater near the moon's south pole. Perhaps that's part of a plan that'll be announced on May 9. So far, though, Blue Origin has only been performing suborbital launches with its new Shepard vehicle, so the moon seems pretty far off at this point. Although Blue Origin is developing a lander called Blue Moon that would be capable of delivering up to 5 tonnes of cargo to the lunar surface as soon as 2023. One thing Blue Origin might be ready to show us soon, though, is the first new Shepard flight with a human passenger on board. Whatever new adventure Blue Origin is embarking on, hopefully it won't end up like the Endurance, which was wrecked on its fateful Antarctic journey. Back to Angelo.
Okay, let's talk about Dream Chaser. Sierra Nevada Corporation's Dream Chaser is quietly making progress towards its latest goal of carrying out resupply missions to the International Space Station starting in 2021. The cargo variant of the spaceplane is now deep into construction ahead of flying on NASA's Commercial Resupply Services 2, or CRS-2, missions. The company also made a rare reference to the crew version of the vehicle, which continues to be an active program under a Space Act agreement with the agency. Dream Chaser will be flying at least 6 missions to the ISS in the 2020s, following NASA's contract award to Sierra Nevada Corporation, along with SpaceX and Orbital ATK for the CRS-2 missions. While the CRS veterans of Cygnus and Dragon are regular visitors to the ISS, Program Manager Kirk Sherman cited the need for dissimilar redundancy in adding Dream Chaser to the mix, a key selling point previously used by Sierra Nevada Corporation during Dream Chaser's crew transportation aspirations. Dream Chaser was making solid progress on the commercial crew milestones. The only blot on her report card was a landing gear failure during a 2013 landing test at the Dryden Flight Research Facility in California. Ironically, however, post-tender recovery of Dream Chaser showed that while the craft suffered minor damage, the crew compartment was intact and all of its systems were still operational. Unintentionally, the landing gear failure accidentally demonstrated Dream Chaser's ability to safely protect its crew cargo and survive a partial landing gear failure scenario at landing. However, it was likely that was one of the reasons Dream Chaser lost out on the final funding round that ultimately saw SpaceX's Crew Dragon, Dragon 2, and Boeing's Starliner CST-100 win the commercial crew contracts to return domestic launch capability for US astronauts for the first time since the retirement of the Space Shuttle fleet in 2011. The landing gear problem was subsequently fixed in follow-on tests. Okay, Peter.
And that's it for Space News this week. Thank you, everybody, and it's back to you, Andrew.